Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is my review of the Panasonic Lumix S 18-40mm f4.5 to 6.3, a compact zoom for full-frame L-mount mirrorless cameras. Launched in October 2024 and costing around $500 or pounds, it was originally teased a few months earlier at the Lumix S9 announcement. It's a perfect match for that compact full-frame body and really should have come out at the same time, but for reasons unknown, either the lens was delayed or the body drafted to fill an earlier launch window than anticipated. Either way, it's here now and becomes a no-brainer for Lumix S9 owners, mandatory even, not to mention tempting for any L-mount owner who wants a compact general-purpose zoom to maximise portability while also capturing ultra-wide views. To put it in perspective, here's the S9 fitted with the Lumix S 20-60mm. Measuring 77 by 87mm and weighing 350 grams, the 20-60 may be fine on a Lumix S5 body, but is just way too big on the S9. But in the absence of the 18-40 at the S9's launch, the 20-60 actually became the default kit zoom for this model. To address size concerns, Panasonic launched the Lumix S 26mm f8 Pancake Prime alongside the S9, which as you can see here is a much more appropriate size combination. This lens is just 18mm thick and weighs a mere 58 grams. But to achieve its small size and weight, the 26 is basic to say the least, with plastic construction, manual focus only, and a fixed and dim f8 aperture. It's actually respectably sharp, but still not a realistic option for day-to-day use. Indeed, I feel these two lenses harmed the initial perception of the S9, which is actually a pretty strong body for many uses. So like the cavalry, enter the Lumix S 18-40mm, which at just 68mm in diameter and 41mm in length when retracted, is only just over twice as thick as the 26 Prime, and at just 155 grams it's still very light. Sure, like other compact zoom lenses, the aperture isn't particularly bright at f4.5 to 6.3, but that's still faster than the 26 f8, with the additional benefits of zooming, autofocus, weatherproofing, and a filter thread and lens cap. And while the range doesn't reach as far as the 20-60, it genuinely starts a tad wider to delight both vloggers and ultra-wide photographers, while 40mm remains close enough to standard coverage to make it a practical walk-around option. Plus again, compare their sizes. Sure, the 20-60 is a little bit brighter too at 3.5 to 5.6, but which lens would you prefer to mount on bodies like the S9? Just before moving on to my tests, I think it's interesting to compare it to the Fujifilm X100VI, seen here on the left. Sure, the X100VI is smaller and thinner and includes a viewfinder that I wish the S9 had, but it's also coupled with a fixed lens and a smaller APS-C sensor. Meanwhile, for fun, here's the Leica Q343, which I was testing at the same time, and I've got a separate review of it if you're interested. Now obviously the Q343 and S9 are very different propositions, but I was still struck by how similar they were in overall size. In terms of build, I'm relieved Panasonic hasn't skimped on the construction of the 18-40. Unlike many small and light kit zooms, the 18-40 has a metal mount and weather sealing including a rubber grommet. There's two control rings, inevitably narrow and pretty close together given the size of the barrel. First, closest to the body is the zoom ring, which must first be twisted to extend the barrel for use. This extends by about 21mm using two sections. The ring then turns between 18 and 40mm with a nicely damped mechanism that allows for precise adjustments, despite the fairly short throw of about 45 degrees. Like other extending lenses, there's a hardish stop at the shortest end to prevent unintentional retraction, but a deliberate twist allows you to retract the barrel for transportation. The second control is a free spinning manual focusing ring, which, depending on the body, can be set to non-linear or linear response, and the latter can be customised to stretch the range between 90 and 360 degrees if preferred. There's just one switch to set the lens between auto and manual focus, handy on bodies like the S9 which don't have a dedicated focus mode control of their own. Meanwhile, at the end of the barrel is a 62mm filter thread, but there's no supplied hood nor a bayonet to mount an optional one. Moving on, let's have a look at the coverage in practice, starting with the 18-40 at 18mm on the S9. This is seriously wide for a kit zoom of any description, and ideal for expansive landscapes, cramped interiors, and also perfect for vlogging, as I'll show in just a moment. Let's now switch between it and the 20-60 at 20mm just to confirm that the new lens really is capturing a wider field of view, as sometimes the quoted focal lengths don't always deliver what you'd expect in practice. This ultra-wide coverage makes the 18-40 tempting regardless of the lens's size. Now at the longer end, starting with the 18-40 at 40mm. Sure, this means the lens is only delivering a 2.2 times optical range, but 40mm is close enough to standard coverage to make it practical as a general purpose option. And again, here's the 20-60 at 60mm, and as I switch between them, you can see the difference in reach. Obviously the 20-60 lets you get closer, but if you're willing to crop the image from the 18-40 at 40mm to match the coverage, then on a 24 megapixel body you're going to end up with about 10 megapixels of resolution. It is however possible to extend the reach when filming video without compromising quality. So let's start here with the standard optical 2.2 times range of the 18-40 in practice when filming 4K video on the S9. But now here's the exact same lens, but using the hybrid zoom mode on the Lumix S9, which exploits the extra sensor resolution to effectively extend the range while maintaining 4K quality. Here it's actually extending the long end to 62mm, but it's cleverer than just making a basic crop, as it also maintains the wide end and seamlessly integrates the scaling. It's pretty clever stuff. Here's the 18-40 on the left in hybrid zoom mode, and the 20-60 on the right in just standard optical mode, proving that you can essentially match the reach of the latter. Of course, you could apply hybrid zoom to extend the 20-60 lens further as well, but I'm pointing out that it's a viable option for shorter lenses like the 18-40. And if you're willing to drop the quality to 1080p as seen here, hybrid zoom can extend the range even further. Here on the 18-40, extending to an equivalent of 125mm. Now again, hybrid zoom means that the 20-60 can also reach even further still given the same options, but it certainly gives the 18-40 more flexibility for video than you might first assume. Note that this feature is currently only available on the Lumix S9. In terms of aperture, the lens varies between f4.5 and 6.3 depending on focal length. It starts gradually closing pretty much as soon as you start zooming in, reducing to f5 at 24mm and f5.6 at 31mm, but only reaching f6.3 once you extend to the longest focal length of 40mm. Now for focusing, starting with the 18-40 at 18mm 4.5 and from near to its closest focusing distance. Here the lens and S9 are pulling focus between near and far using a single area quickly and without fuss. And now at 40mm f6.3, the maximum aperture at the long end, and again showing quick and smooth focus pulls between the bottle and the wall behind it. And now at 18mm again, but this time for video in 4K on the S9. Here the lens and body are confidently refocusing between near and far without hunting or overshooting, and thanks to the close focusing here, there's even some blurring effects despite the modest f4.5 aperture. And now at 40mm f6.3, again showing confident focus pulls. You can get an idea of the depth of field at 40mm here for close-ish subjects, as well as an idea of focus breathing for video. Let's now stay at 40mm 6.3 and switch to a human subject, well, mostly human anyway. Here you can see the camera and lens easily tracking me as I move around and back and forth, as well as giving an idea of the potential blur behind me. Now 40mm is perfect for presentations to camera, although at f6.3 you're not going to be getting much background separation, plus those bokeh blobs in the top left have got some pretty nasty outlining, which I'll look at in more detail in a moment. At the wide end of the lens, it's perfect for environmental presentations where you're going to see loads of your surroundings. This makes it ideal for cramped situations, but don't get too close to the lens at 18mm or you're going to see some pretty bad distortion. 18mm is also ideal for handheld vlogging, again allowing you to capture a lot of your surroundings even at arm's length. It also provides some latitude for applying digital stabilization, so let's check out some walking clips. Okay, for my first clip here, there's no stabilization at all. Now the lens doesn't have optical stabilization of its own, so it is going to be reliant on what's in the body, and I've got everything turned off here for starters. And I'm also going to be using the maximum f4.5 aperture across all these clips. So let's now turn on sensor shift IBIS on the S9, which has certainly smoothed out some of those bumps, but also introduces some warping at the edges. This is sadly normal for most IBIS based systems when walking with an ultra wide lens. So next, here's the S9 with IBIS and the optional E-stabilization for video set to standard. This incurs a mild crop, reducing the field of view a bit, but it's still wide enough for handheld vlogging and it has certainly improved the overall stability. Your mileage will of course vary depending on how steady you can hold the camera and how bumpy it is underfoot. And now finally for E-stabilization set to high, where the crop becomes much more substantial. But in turn the footage has become much smoother, albeit now the coverage has become arguably too tight for hand-holding with both hands. You may enjoy better looking results one-handed or with the camera on a short stick. Regardless, there's greater opportunity for crops than the 20-60 because the 18-40 of course starts genuinely wider. Next, for a quick focus breathing test here at 18mm and manually focusing from infinity to the closest distance, where you'll see the field of view reduce a little bit as if you're zooming in. And now at 40mm, again between infinity and the closest distance, where the coverage again reduces a little. Next for my distant landscape quality test, angled as always so that fine details run into the corners. Again, I personally prefer to test optical resolution with a distant subject, as charts can only show how a lens performs at close range. It's more effort to do this, but I think it's worth it. You're looking at the Lumix S 18-40 at 18mm and its maximum aperture at that focal length of f4.5, and taking a close look in the middle shows a decent degree of detail right out of the gate. Closing the aperture to f5.6 does improve the contrast a little, but this is now arguably the lens at its best. Returning to f4.5 and heading into the corner shows the details soften a little bit, but it remains pretty respectable and there's only mild darkening due to vignetting. Closing the aperture to f5.6 improves the quality a little all round, and it's probably worth doing for landscape shots, but there's no benefit to closing it any further still. Comparing the 18-40 at 18mm on the left and the 20-60 at 20mm on the right with the same degree of magnification shows them performing similarly in terms of actual resolved detail, with a slight edge to the 18-40 even if you close their apertures. Next for the 18-40, roughly midway through its range at 28mm, where the maximum aperture becomes f5.4. Here in the middle of the frame, the lens is delivering sharp details with high contrast, and closing the aperture doesn't bring significant benefits. So let's now move into the corner, where again the details remain pretty well resolved even at the maximum aperture, and there's little to no benefit to stopping down any further. And finally for the 18-40 at its longest focal length of 40mm, where the maximum aperture becomes f6.3. Taking a closer look in the middle again shows good detail and contrast out of the gate, and nothing much to be gained from stopping down. Heading into the corner shows those details becoming a little bit softer, but it's remaining pretty well behaved at the maximum aperture. Stopping down to f8 improves the corner sharpness a little. So like many modern zooms with fairly modest apertures, such as those from Canon, the quality is pretty sharp in terms of details. Moving on to portraits, here's a shot taken at 40mm 6.3, where the combination of focal length and aperture means you're not going to be seeing much background blur. Zooming in a little shows the details are still sharp from this closer distance, but looking at the rendering in the background reveals some outlining on those bokeh blobs, especially to the left hand side of my head as you're looking at the image. Not ideal, but equally not surprising for this kind of optical design. For a more formal test of bokeh and rendering, here's my ornament test taken from the closest focusing distance at 40mm f6.3. As seen in earlier tests, you can't get that close to the subject at 40mm, which, coupled with the modest aperture, means little chance for blurring in the background. Looking closer at those blobs though confirms the unusual bokeh hinted on my portrait test. There's outlining and textures within the blobs, not to mention a smaller second ring in there. Again, bokeh style is down to personal preference, but to me this looks pretty unattractive. It's definitely the weak point of this lens. Closing the aperture to f8 shrinks the blobs but doesn't really improve their look, while at f11 they've become so small you can't really see those artifacts within anymore. Out of interest, here's the same test but at 18mm 4.5 from as close as the lens could focus at this focal length. Here the reproduction is actually greater than it is at 40mm, albeit with some distortion at this close range, and again those blobs have that weird looking concentric ring inside them. And at the other end of the aperture scale, here's how diffraction spikes look on the sun at 18mm f22. It's an interesting effect with the 14 spikes indicating a 7-bladed diaphragm system, but with alternate spikes at different lengths and all of them diverging a bit too. Here's another example showing some flare as well. I wouldn't describe them as being the most attractive diffraction spikes, and technically they look unlike most that I've seen, but as a visual effect it's entirely personal again, so do you like the way they look? And for my final test, here's a macro result showing a ruler as close as I could autofocus at 40mm 6.3, where it's capturing around 220mm across the frame. Again, pretty modest close-up capabilities. And now it's time for my verdict with a bunch of sample images. I strongly believe that every camera system benefits from some really small lenses, and the Lumix S 18-40 certainly fulfills that brief for L-mount mirrorless cameras. The retracting design allows it to be genuinely thin at just 41mm when folded down, and you'll barely notice its 155g weight even on the smaller bodies. This is the lens the Lumix S9 really needed at launch to prove its compact potential, turning it into an almost pocketable full-frame system with a surprisingly practical zoom range. I was struck by how much fun it was to take them out as an everyday carry. And while there are some small lenses for other full-frame systems, none are this compact nor zoom as wide, making it attractive to ultra-wide fans whether shooting expansive landscapes, tight interiors or vlogging at arm's length. Couple it with the hybrid zoom on the S9 and you'll also enjoy the benefit of longer reach for video. Like many modern small lenses, it's also respectably sharp on detail, and I was impressed that Panasonic equipped it with a metal mount and weather sealing, albeit no obvious means to fit a hood. But the 18-40's optical design does suffer in terms of background blur and rendering. Now, you're never going to get particularly shallow depth of field effects with a maximum aperture of 4.5 to 6.3, but the blobs it does deliver suffer from messy artifacts that will have you wanting to close it further. This is the downside of the lens and a compromise shared with some other dim aperture compact zooms. But to be fair, you're not choosing the 18-40 for attractive bokeh, you're getting it to turn a full-frame body into a more portable prospect, and in this respect it transforms the Lumix S9 in particular, so much so it should be a mandatory or at least a very strongly recommended purchase for any S9 owner now or in the future. Hopefully it'll become the new kit zoom. You're also buying it for its ultra-wide coverage without breaking the bank, and this in turn will make it an attractive option for any L-mount owner if they haven't already got the 20-60 kit zoom. L-mount owners who do want to vlog with greater background blur though should aim for the Lumix S 18mm f1.8. That's a really nice lens, but it is considerably larger and roughly double the price. Which brings me to the end of this lens review, so tell me in the comments what you think and whether it makes the S9 more attractive to you. I still wish that camera had a viewfinder, but at least a new firmware update extends recording times at your own risk, as well as the chance to view multiple frame guides at the same time. The camera is also now available in white in addition to the original colours. Thanks for watching, consider subscribing with alerts if you don't want to miss any of my reviews, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.